Right. Hello. Thanks for coming back to the table so that we could get moving into the next section. Roman, do we have a slide for this that? Oh, okay, that works. Perfect. So we are super excited to be able to share with you all the opportunity to hear from some community partners who are familiar with Oregon's high-tech workforce and the barriers to equitable access and participation. We're going to learn a little bit about some programs, projects, and partnerships across the state. The participants that are being served by those opportunities, as well as barriers that these organizations have encountered and identified in either program delivery or participant engagement. And I'm going to give the panelists the opportunity to introduce themselves, but we are joined by the following organizations: ENCODE XP, Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency, Hacienda, CDC, and IRCO, the Immigrant and Refugee Community Organization. I'm going to give the panelists the opportunity to introduce themselves and their organizations, and then we're going to have a very informal dialogue about the work that they're doing, and hopefully have some time for questions at the end. So with that.
Hi, my name is Faye. I am the Executive Director of ENCODE XP, which is a new nonprofit in Southern Oregon in Medford. And we teach kids AI and tech, ages 12 to 14.
Hello. Yeah. Hi, my name is Surya Joshi. I work with Immigrants and Refugee Community Organization. I'm a program coordinator for one of our tech training program. I do also work with economic opportunity programs in Portland and Washington County. I'm also a doctoral student at PSU, focusing on workforce development. So this is also a subject matter interest for me on the academic, like from the academic perspective.
I'm Tamara Perry. I'm from Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency, Dominguez Resource Center, and I'm a job developer.
I work with Tamara at Dominguez Resource Center. We are the smallest program at Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency, but I say we're small but mighty. And I'm the program manager for our employment services. So we are a re-entry resource center. So we work with folks who are currently incarcerated at the Marion County Transition Center, as well as currently just Marion County, hoping to expand out into Pocan Yamhill. We work with any resident who has any sort of background, and if there's a criminal background that is a barrier in their lives, then they are eligible for our services.
Hi everyone, my name is Ina Palos. My pronouns are A and she, her. I'm with Hacienda CDC. Hacienda CDC is a community development corporation. So that's the CDC. We're a nonprofit, centers housing, educational opportunities, homeownership, and development. Boiled down, we work with youth, family, affordable housing, and I'm with the Youth and Family Services Department. I'm the Deputy Director. So the program specifically that works in workforce readiness, digital literacy, and implementation of this program. And I'll pass it to my colleagues to share a little bit more.
Hi, my name is Visa Alvarez. I am the program lead at the Adoras program, which Pilar just mentioned. It's basically Hacienda's new digital inclusion project.
And my name is Erica Hernandez. My pronouns are she, her, and Enya, and I'm the Director of Youth and Family Services at Hacienda CDC. So Adoras is one of our programs as a part of Youth and Family Services that we We have an early childhood program after school and a lot of programs that center around our low-income housing developments. And so we're very community-based and get to work with families and all stages of their child education. First, dreams.
Great, thank you all. I'm hoping that you can each tell us a little bit about your program and your approach to connecting underrepresented populations to high demand technology jobs. What's unique about your approach, and what have you found to be successful, and what are the challenges? And maybe we'll just go in reverse order if the Hacienda folks.
So in the mission of Hacienda and putting housing first, I think that is a unique factor in how we do workforce readiness. Especially in our department, we focus the voice of the clients and the residents. That's a community member that's just coming into our learning centers to really, use the space for open computer hours. So really going to residents, clients, general community, and hearing from them what are those needs, what are those obstacles, and really centering building community to bring folks into that workforce readiness. And a lot of that work we have found that just basic digital literacy skills are a big barrier to entering any workforce, whether it has to do with tech or it has to do with, early childhood.
Yeah, so we at Demunis, we've provided direct employment services for some time, but we were fortunate to get a capacity building grant from HEC, and that's allowed us to bring on someone like Tamara to do actual more outreach, expand our capacity to really outreach to employers and educate them on fair chance hiring. So I would say, as you noted, with our client population, tech is new, right? So we haven't necessarily had great luck connecting our folks to tech jobs, or even knowing really what tech jobs are and where those opportunities for training and kind of their entryway could be. So I think, first of all, as someone who's worked directly with clients and now is on kind of the management side of things, it's just not even something that dawned on me as an option for my clients, with them usually finding better luck in more general labor type of jobs, right? But I know that Tamara and I are very excited at sort of this expanding definition of what tech means, what tech jobs are, what trainings are needed. Also hopefully means expanding and opening up that field to clients like ours. As noted, our client population has lack of access to technology in general, while incarcerated, but also likely before and after, because they can't afford to probably have technology in their home or to have quality technology. Also, if there are some places where maybe there's a sort of tech-based or tech-adjacent, I'm learning new great terms that I'm writing down here. They might be learning some tech stuff while they're incarcerated, but not only for those trainings, but really for trainings in general while incarcerated, they very rarely translate to in real life jobs and opportunities. So I think there's a lot of room there for looking at what's already happening while folks are incarcerated and looking at those intentionally and seeing where there's weak opportunities there to create that pipeline and pathway. And again, even where there's, so what we do now and what we'll probably continue really focusing on with our folks is those basic skills as well. We want to make sure we help with their access and their basic literacy. We're talking about, even when they're on board, like every aspect of job search and hiring requires some basic skills and literacy. And then a final note, even where there's addressing the skills and trainings, employers still have to hire them. So that's where, right? So even if we open up these pathways, we ultimately have to get employers on board with hiring folks with backgrounds.
For the company that ERCO works with, we primarily work with immigrants and refugee population. So people who are resettling as refugees, people who immigrate to the United States, or most of our program can enroll anyone who have a work permit. So basically, everybody is eligible to work when they get into any one of IRCO's program. Also, IRCO has a policy of no wrong door. So we have across organization more than 200 different programs, 200 different services, contracts, and people can enter through one program. It might be a program that helps people with their immigration issues. People, where there are like a children's department has a program where there is a home visitor who visits home, helping with childcare issue and stuff like that. And then they learn about parents struggling with employment, and then they connect parents to us. So we kind of exchange participants across many of our like different programs, and also inside workforce development department we have youth program, adult program, and then many program kind of collaborate together, because there are programs that have scholarship funds, there are programs that have more career coaching funds, there are programs that may have better rental assistance for participants who are getting into training and they lose their income for the duration of that training. And so we kind of collaborate. And on the tech specific field, we have a tech training program, which is funded by Work Systems. But currently that program focuses more on CompTIA training program, which is awesome. I saw somebody from CompTIA, so thank you so much. One of the main advantage of that program, we just learned, like our coach, Walters couldn't join us today, but he could have talked about it in a more better manner. But it is the issue of network, especially in tech field. We need to have a better network for a participant to be successful. Without that, it is that one industry where like you can have a shiny resume, but unless somebody can have trust on you, like you are not hired. And we had one participant completed CompTIA training, and he got a job for a company that works with GIS. So totally unrelated, the participant have master's degree in environmental science. That one basic training allowed him to get a job in his field, which is not kind of a basic desktop service stuff like that. And also with immigrant and refugee population, probably I'll talk about this later on as well. There is this skill gap or confidence gap, or I would also say a basic skills gap, where a participant may have a skill that is required, but they are not confident, because when they do any type of aptitude test, they have studied in their cultural context. The context doesn't translate to kind of American educational system, that context. And so they lose interest, they cannot understand the questions, those, puzzle type of question where you, like, it's a language issue. And then, they slowly lose interest, but at the same time, a person as an immigrant who come here, they have their family, they have to make like monthly income to pay rent, and send their children to like school and stuff like that. And with all of that, focusing on one career, it becomes a luxury for many, because there might be two spouses where both of them are working and then one can make up income while other person, invest their time in the career that they want, but not every family can do that. And then so our general population kind of are struggling around that realm.
At Codex P, we're really passionate about teaching kids through project-based learning. We want them to have lots of hands-on experience. And through that hands-on experience, we really want them to have real-world deliverables and learn skills they could take with them the rest of their life. We integrate training in 6 distinct careers in tech, such as software engineering, graphic design, 3D animation, and digital architecture, as well as tech writing, communications, marketing, and project management. We place diversity, equity, and inclusion at the center of our classes. And our target population has a higher than average likelihood to come from generational poverty. A lot of them have limited access to high-speed internet and computers and or experience social barriers. That is definitely one of our biggest issues we've had, is that a lot of the students that we're hoping to help don't see themselves in the tech field. They don't see themselves getting these jobs or even learning these things in general. So what we spend a lot of time doing is how do we give these kids interest, and then when they're interested, how do we keep them interested and show them they have a future in this world, in the tech world. We primarily serve communities of color, women, low-income communities, and rural and frontier communities. And it's been really cool to sort of, work with these kids. We recently established a partnership with BASE, which is the Black Alliance for Social Empowerment in Southern Oregon. And we have a class of 40 students of color, and they come in and we work on projects with them and get to know them. And yeah, it's been really great.
Thanks so much. I think some of you touched on this during your project description, but would love to hear more about what you'd like to share with consortium members about the populations that you work with. What are the unique barriers to education and employment? And what are some of the cultural strengths that the communities you serve bring to both those spaces? And let's start with Midland.
So there was just so much coming up in y'all's meeting that was really just kind of hitting on some of these points. So when we were talking about mitigating for bias, just noting that it's really important to recognize that incarceration, there's higher levels of incarceration for just about every priority population. So folks with disabilities, LGBTQ plus folks, the BIPOC community, there is higher levels of incarceration in each of those populations. And so we just really can't talk about equity and mitigating bias in hiring without talking about mass incarceration and the way that has impacted specific communities. And so that's something I want to note about this population is, first of all, just its diversity. I just don't think people realize how diverse the formerly incarcerated population is in so many ways. Of course, unique barriers, there are many, unfortunately. I would say that, there's a lot of trauma that our folks have dealt with. And so that often leads to why they end up incarcerated. And then the incarceration causes more trauma. So of course, high levels of substance abuse, mental illness, and then often developmental disabilities as well. And then there's a lack of access to the treatment and services that they need for those barriers. A lot of folks are leaving incarceration with debt, and we'll kind of touch on this more later. So it can even include garnishment of wages. So there's a lot of working under the table. So there's just a lot that goes into their decision-making around employment because of their particular situation and the insurmountable debt they often leave incarceration with and responsibilities that they have. They've got to make decisions that are best for, you touched on this, things that really are like a luxury for them that we wouldn't, the rest of us don't really recognize. Of course, stigmatization. So, and that's often compounded by other forms of discrimination. So not only are they a person of color, a queer person, have, limited English speaking abilities, they have a criminal background, which is perhaps often also houseless. But I would argue that having a criminal background, being formerly incarcerated, particularly having serious felonies, which most of the clients we work with do, might be the most stigmatized group in our society, in Oregon, in our communities, in the country. Now, what I really want to talk about is the strengths, and I loved that we I noted on the survey, the most needed soft skills, there was a lot of alignment with some of the cultural strengths that I noted for our folks. What I noted myself was emotional intelligence, hardworking, excited to learn, loyal employees, natural leaders and mentors. And so that really aligned well with some of the things I saw here with cross-cultural competence. So due to the diversity of this population, a lot of people who have been incarcerated have interacted and lived with a very diverse community while incarcerated and are very comfortable doing so. I think there's a really unfortunate stereotype or we see in movies, you know, the gangs and yes, these things exist in prisons, but there's also a lot of community and a lot of cross-cultural community within prisons and jails as well. And then I'd say they're also very empathetic because of their own life experience and not judgmental. Absolutely perseverant and self-learners because they have to be. They just have to figure it out. They don't have access to the same traditional routes, and so they have to figure it out. And so I could go on and on. They've got a lot of strengths, but it's nice to get to talk about. That's not always a point in these kind of, you know, I don't get to talk about that often. I'm talking about our clients, so they're really into that.
Hacienda, do you prefer it? Absolutely. What's something you'd like consortium members to know about the populations you serve, including unique barriers in education and employment, as well as some cultural strengths that the communities you serve bring to the workplace?
Yes, so the Equitable program has 3 learning centers across Portland. We are located in the Cully neighborhood, right below our main headquarters, so right in the corner of Killingsworth and Cully, so that's the Cully Learning Center. Our second site is in New Columbia, which is over towards the Portsmouth, St. John's neighborhood, and our third site, the Jade District Learning Center, so it's located in the. And I preface that by saying that each of those communities are very different. So the populations that we serve are going to be based on the communities that are in the neighborhood. And just like I think that creates hubs of community with our affordable housing, these learning centers are creating those hubs of community. The Jade District, for example, we have a lot of folks that identify as Asian Islanders that come in and are, you know, first generation, second generation, that, you know, an Asian language is their first language. When we go to Cully, we have the largest population of immigrants and refugees, like a lot, big Latina community, followed by a big and continuing to grow Somali community, again, with not just Spanish as their first language or Mai or other African languages, but indigenous Latin American languages. So we have folks that are multilingual and have that, you know, brain elasticity and then continue, you know, growth through the work that they are doing. And then of course we have New Columbia, which is located actually in KOIC campus. For KOIC, but it's the Portland. Yes, what was that? Industrial Center, yes, at the Rosemary Anderson High School. And so we are not only with like a technical academy, but it's also a home forward affordable housing community. So across all of these points, we're not only working with folks that come from diverse backgrounds, that English is not their second language, but oftentimes their third language, but also that live in affordable housing. So they come from, you know, the lower ends of social economic status. And so this is, you know, youth that are entering middle school, so that 11 to 12-year-old, all the way to adults that are returning and entering the workforce. And so a lot of those obstacles are with, you know, how do I get connected? How do I get access to technology when I can't really afford to pay my rent and I need internet and computer? And this was just brought up more more to light across a lot of sectors, and especially in the tech industry, just the barriers of technology. The pandemic just made it aware. I think it was always there. It just became very apparent for everybody. And even within that, the social networks, that strength that those communities have of being with each other, knowing where to go to, knowing that they have that to go to, we were really able to bring all those together to make those connections and partner up with schools, school districts, other community partners that are in the neighborhood to support this new initiative, and really this new initiative from the city that was thanks in part to the work that Verizon is doing. And so we are part of that community initiative from Verizon, and we have various other centers. Portland just happens to be one of those other cities, and they saw the need and also the strength to bridge that digital divide.
Thank you. Thank you.
Venture capital investments in the US today still go to more than 97% male populations or male founders, with women receiving less than 2% and people of color receiving less than 1%. And clearly those numbers are not what we'd like them to be. High school aptitude testing of more than 31,000 Oregon high school students showed us a high aptitude for computer science and technology, but a very low interest in these fields. Girls actually score significantly higher than boys, but 4% of girls are interested for some reason. And so, like, what are we going to do about that? You know, it's like one of our main missions of Codex P is how do we take the aptitude and interest or aptitude these kids have, turn that into interest, and turn that into, you know, jobs, career pathways to these high-paying jobs. And you mentioned what sort of what do the population trying to bring to the table, and from my experience working with some of the kids at base, for example, I think it's a sort of life and color and energy that I don't see in a lot of tech spaces today. A lot of the things that they're interested in are, you know, they really want to work with music and provide like bright, vibrant art. And I think it would really sort of just brighten up the tech world in general, bring a lot more color and just spirit into the world. And I think that's something we're definitely missing. Is just some happen the tech stuff. So I think that definitely creates a really amazing opportunity to train students who don't normally see themselves in these fields, give them some skill and some experience, and they can get jobs that start at, you know, $80K per year. And it would be cool to show them that like the kind of work they can do can be remote. So for one, it can keep them in Southern Oregon. They don't have to leave Southern Oregon to be able to, you know, get the job that they want or have these high-paying jobs that can stay in the valley. I think that's something really important too, is building the community and keeping people here and growing life here in Oregon.
For the population that we work with, primarily immigrants and refugee population, there are some unique barriers. I think I mentioned that earlier as well. So, you know, when we talk about somebody who in secondary education, you know, high school GED, a lot of people who come from other countries, especially who have kind of different experience, you know, during that quest to survive a war or a conflict, or like being from their home country, so education, keeping up with that skills that they have gained is a lasting a family. You know, like once we think about it, it's more about survival, immigration to a safe space, and then when they come here, the first barrier they kind of face is that you know, a lot of employers, a lot of even from the colleges, you know, people do not understand what refugee status means. So like people who have accent, people who are new to this country, like a lot of employers think that we cannot work, they are not eligible to work, which is not true. And that itself, the convincing employers that they can actually work. It may not be at the same skills level that they were actually trained for, and like they need some time to, go through, realizing that trauma, and then, getting over that. Like there are a lot of other services that are needed at the same time. But then the first thing is trust on these people. There is the employment verification process, where, people will know that if somebody is not eligible to work, that is at the point where we can talk. But when we, at their face, ask about whether they are eligible to work or not, it kind of creates a barrier for space. The second, I feel is, when they want to upskill themselves, get this skill and, they want to approach higher education. Many people want to kind of compensate that lost year, like people who had their bachelor's degree, want to go for master's degree or get some kind of education so that they can feel that they can compete in this job market. And when they approach higher, higher education institution, they are asked to take ESL class. Like we've had quite a few participants who were taking like ESL classes at Mount Hood and PCC, and then when they approached us, like they have master's degree in their country, and there should be a like a counselor should know like what is how that transition can be made, because people can just do TOEFL exam, like they can. I think West are like there are some agencies like which can translate the degree, and then people can get into the appropriate education level where they want to kind of restart, and so that people would not lose their years. Like an undergraduate degree is what, like 4 years, and then 2 years for a master's program. And so we've had quite a few participants like who went through that only. Like I've had a participant in 2017, I believe. He was an electrical engineer from Iraq. But then when he approached ESU for a master's degree, he was not admitted, even though he already had a master's degree. But then when we started working with him, he was kind of a talented person, and he was able to convince an employer to work as an electrical engineer. He got the PE certification. He was able to pass that exam, and I think now he has already completed his PhD from ESU. And so, there are those people who are, and then his advantage was he was single, even though his family was still in Dubai, like he was here on his own. He had all the time to study and persevere, but many families do not have that luxury because they have children, they have family to look for. Like many people come with a lot of health issue when they immigrate as a refugee, and those barriers are there. And the second thing is skills translation. As I mentioned earlier, somebody who can trust and guide them through the process where they can translate their skills, that is absolutely needed. And then time is another thing. Like people who want to study, but then they also need to make money. So either there has to be a large resource that they can support while they are transitioning, but also in the program has to be developed in a way which can accommodate a participant schedule. Like they can work as well as study. Hybrid program, fully online program for those who are like comfortable with that. That is needed. And the opportunity, if we talk about, is it's just immense opportunity that they bring with. I am from Nepal, and then in South Asia we have a word called Gujarat. Like it is a kind of like making things up, or like a problem solving skill. That is something that a lot of immigrants come up with. Like they have, this inherent way to, do a lot more with even little resources, and it translates to every single profession. Like if you like visit ever, like we have like 95% of like immigrant workforce, and then we survive even at like, the time where we have waste of resources, And then that's also the skill that they come up with at like any employers, a lot of employers on non-tech field, like who have hired immigrant workforce can be an estimate like about that. And then, this striving for betterness, like that's another opportunity that, every single immigrant workforce participant, will bring to their workspace. And that is something that we need to appreciate therefore, and also, provide that opportunity, that entry, like a lot of people just, even if they are getting a kind of a volunteer, work opportunity or an internship, appreciation about that, and, we strive for what they like want to achieve. That is what they are going to bring to the workplace.
Thank you all so much. Hoping you can tell us a little bit about the role that public-private partnerships play in your program administration, particularly when you think about advancing a diverse high-tech workforce. Are there key components to successful partnerships that include employers or education partners, economic development partners, or other community partners? And I feel like I'm spinning a wheel in my mind. Let's start with Hacienda and just work our way back on this.
I think, especially in terms of private partnerships for us, like we quite literally would not have the funding to do what we do without private partnerships. And then also with those public partnerships in developing the programs that we do, it's really important for us to be partnering with other local organizations who also understand the communities that we serve and who can really bring that the sort of local community perspective that we find to be so important in our programming.
And also all of our learning centers that Pilar spoke about, they are literally in school buildings that share that goal of developing pathways and really connecting to community members that are facing barriers to those pathways, and so being placed in those buildings and collaborating with those partners, I think the strength that we see in sharing that space is that we get to build deep long-term relationships with those partners, and they get to understand more our communities, why we're choosing the partners like Free Geek, or Chick Tech or others to provide programming, because they share that mission of providing inclusive spaces, of adapting and designing curriculum to be more responsive to community need. And so, I always think about, if we were to just post up flyers, somewhere to folks in our communities about different opportunities, there wouldn't likely be much attendance because there's no relationship there. And I think trust, for a lot of folks visiting our learning centers, trust that it's a safe space for learning, and that we really welcome all levels and have that growth mindset helps with, I think, what Surya mentioned earlier about the fact that confidence in their own learning ability to learn new things, or just kind of battling that shame of like, I don't know what this means in my email, or that this is what I thought an email was. It's really important that we have welcoming spaces, and not just, it's really just not about the curriculum that we're providing. And I think that for both private and public partnerships, when we have really been working on our deepening our partnerships with PCC and other higher education networks, and of course with Rosemary and Gibson High School and all of their workforce programs. But you know, I think what's so important to us is that we're not just looking for our graduating high schoolers or for our community members reentering the workforce. We don't want to just like placing them in a job or having a job at the end of that pathway is not just the goal, but that we're building really intentional networks and partnerships so that we know that you know, our community member and a DACA recipient is not just going to continue to feel welcomed and empowered in their journey towards their goal, but that they're landing in a place of employment where they will also be supported and understood, and you know, feel that their strengths will be able to show in those spaces. So that's really important to us to be very strategic about all levels of those partnerships.
Thank you.
I think excuse me, one of the things we need to do as a consortium is expand our definition of high tech. You know, clearly we do need to have the higher level tech, you know, competency to compete with the world. But, you know, as we've learned today, there's a lot of tech adjacent positions that are out that we need to expand and make sure that we're not just educating the people to become coders, the DevOps, and that we need to come back here and grab the people back here who don't apply for the jobs. Some of our clients don't apply for the jobs because you have to do it online, and they don't even know how to fill out the application online. So what we need to do is grab those people, meet them where they are, and teach them these technical skills to live in today's world. And it's not just to get a job, but it's to get a job in a field where they can actually advance. The other thing that, and Skip, I've got lots of ideas for your survey. One of the things that I see on a lot of job applications is computer proficient. What does that mean? I mean, I'm pretty sure if I go to IBM, computer proficient means something much different than if I go to a construction site. You know, so putting on a job application that you must be computer proficient, somebody who may be able to do the job completely fine, and the only thing maybe they don't know is how to do their online onboarding, they're not even going to apply because they don't think they're computer proficient. So we need to hone into those kind of skills, and we need to find out when an employer says, I need computer proficient, what does that mean? And are we meeting the needs to educate the populations that we're working with to make sure that they are computer proficient in those kind of capacities? And the other thing that, especially with our population, with background checks, I understand the world today, and I understand technology, and I understand access, that there are some access components that you cannot have people with backgrounds. But does that mean every single job within the company has access to that? I hope not. You know, I mean, I'm sure that supposedly our high tech is smart enough that they have enough firewalls that a person working in this job is not going to have full access to the full system. So I think that's the other thing that we need to do is educate our employers to not blanket policies that say no background checks, because there may be some positions that they cannot have any kind of a background. But there may be some positions within their company that they can have backgrounds. So we need to do work on our end, and we also need to do an awful lot of work educating the employers out there.
When we talk about partnership, I believe that, you know, we need to ask, you know, who, what, and what's our end goal. Is it employment? Is it training? You know, what are we trying to achieve through that partnership? Especially, you know, this will probably transcend only like not only immigrant population, but for everyone. You know, we need to see like the industry in the same table, as well as training institutions, especially from the colleges, who have all the infrastructure that probably is needed, for industry. Like a couple of weeks ago, I read a news about TSMC struggling to hire a workforce, and I can pretty much guarantee that there are enough foreign trained engineers who need that transition into the industry. And then from the colleges, other higher institutions, there are other training organizations. They have the capacity to kind of leverage that. And we need to come up with ideas, to what end, like how can we foster that partnership? We had a couple of years ago, Clackamas Community College has a kind of a mobile lab for CNA1 training. So, IRCO does caregiver training. So we could leverage CCC's resources because they can just park their mobile lab at IRCO facility, do their training. Next day they can move to another space and then do the lab there. So, similarly in a tech field, we need to be kind of more innovative where there is a partnership that can actually, allow people to participate more. So, that's where I think we need to concentrate our thoughts and leadership and resources so that it makes it easier for a community to access the training and then access a job after that as well. So empowering the existing institution, making sure that the partnership is working for the people, especially like people who have transportation difficulties. Community organization is probably the first place that they think about accessing any resources, like whether that is rent assistance resources, whether that is training resources, job resources, every single resources are accessed through this organization. It can be THS because that's where a lot of people go, especially low-income people who need SNAP or TANF resources. Those can be a nodal points where people can access those resources, and then that's where we need to, collaborate with in order to bring these resources to the benefit this need and who can actually benefit from all the investment that like where we.
So partnerships are very important for us, especially like working with children. It's really important to have grow a relationship with not just the kids, but with the adults and gain trust. And so in our experience, it's been a lot of outreach and communication between different groups of people, especially the different groups of people made up of the population that, is our whole aim that we're trying to help and trying to get in the field. So it's been really interesting working with these different groups because they're sort of interested in different things, and we host open houses and sort of test drive classes, and we do relationships with the main people who are running the organizations and running the groups, and we build trust, and then it's sort of how we integrate kids into our classrooms. And that is definitely really important because we could just, post a poster on the wall, say, oh, like, come on kids, like, all learn about tech. But if we actually reach out and we show, hey, we care about this community, we really want, how do we help you guys? How do we get your kids interested? What your kids like to do? Like, let's do that together. Let's see if we can work together. And it's not just about getting kids to other classes, it's also growing a sense of community. Because, I've met so many people just going and reaching out into the community of Southern Oregon. And it's been really fun and it's really rewarding. And I think it makes the kids feel safer going to us, knowing that this is like, okay, well, group I already know, and also just an easier way to have access to that with the population directly, with direct line of communication.
Thanks. I am looking at the time and would love to open it up for questions. If folks have questions for our panelists, either as a whole or for any of the organizations individually, and Turner is going to run around with the question and with the microphone. I see
Attorney knows as well, I ask those questions. I would be really interested to hear, and this came a little bit around the comments around not having enough time to do training and resources, but also having luxury of training for a specific type of job. And as I think about the rapidly evolving technology sector and selfishly the clean energy sector where I work, is there benefit, and would the folks that you serve see benefit in finding this kind of fundamental skills and training that could be applicable to multiple jobs, so that as they continue to do the work that they're doing, they could, go down X, Y, or Z pathway, but they have the foundational skills for those careers?
I would absolutely say so. What we don't want is we don't want to train them for a job, because as we've talked about, retention isn't always there. So if we give them a very, the basic where they can choose a path, and then we train them for that, then they have some flexibility. And it's not like, well, that didn't work for me, so why bother anymore? So no, I think that's a very good idea.
Yes, and that's a lot of the work that we're doing, is building that foundational skills, that information. It's all about transferable skills, not necessarily fitting into that specific role that's out there. And I think that's also where partnerships come into play, because if, for example, our connections to work pathways are in STEM and STEM, for example. However, with some of our partners, CC, they have a workforce navigator that's for nursing, and that's the path that person's looking for. Like, great, let's make those connections, let's build one of those partnerships and hear from those folks that are coming through our doors, get you the basics, get the technology that you need, and who can equip you with, a laptop or a tablet to lead that work. Then let's build you up, provide those skills, and help you make those networks, so that then you can kind of choose where you need to go next. We're just more that foundational platform, and we know that outside of us, we cannot be the experts in every industry that is out there. But we are experts in making those relationships and making those connections, and that's what we
Any other?
So for us, our main focus is making sure the kids are very well-rounded. And a lot of the kids we're working with are younger, closer to 12 to 15. And at that age, a lot of it is giving them interest and showing them that they can be in that field, and then teaching them basic computer skills. We luckily have been able to provide each student with laptops and food and transportation to make there be no barriers, basically. If we want everyone to be able to have access, and the only reason they wouldn't come is because they don't want to, not because they wouldn't be able to. And our program is completely free, so anyone can have access to it. And so as they get a little older, especially if they've been through our program and just, you get older and you get to know yourself a little bit more, that's when they could start to learn more specialized skills for certain jobs. But I know for our program, at least, it's more so, how do we give them a general knowledge and skill set of how to use computer, what is coding, what is AI, how do we use these tools to help me in the future with pretty much any job? Because I think these skills will help anyone in any job. Even if you're a writer, I think it will benefit you.
Yeah, I think this is where the network effect comes. Every single success that I've seen through our program, especially in tech field has been like a part of a larger, like when somebody is a part of that larger trusted network, that's where the success comes from. You know, whether it's a CompTIA certification, whether it is a certification from I think UFO's a training program, a tech training program, whether it is any type of boot camps, a quick start training that like Intel is working with PCC. Those type of like training not only provide skills, but also they kind of bring those participants into a wider trusted networks. And then that's what ensures a success. We've had participants who kind of have a very hard time translating their skills. Like we have currently like animator from Iran, but then he's still struggling with language and then like showing off what he knows. So, because of that, we are not able to connect him to any training, any kind of ongoing stuff. So, he's still looking for a job. Like there have been we have had like Ukrainian women who kind of makes all these puppets. I'm pretty much sure that if she works for business, she will be like a really, really good, model maker. Like she's just so much passionate. But then, how do we translate that skills through a resume, which can be trusted by employers? And then that's where the gap is, and then that's where that network, consortium effect, partnership. That's where like they can flourish and make our participants probably more successful in the industry.
Thanks. Any other questions? Yeah.
First, just a quick observation to formally update the population timeline about the trauma and the death, also the fact that that priority population, among others, has very high emission. I think there are some actions from that observation that I'd like to point out. One is that mental health care or access, cost, and outcomes. Mental health care, I think this could be a topic for the healthcare part of the consortium. So, looking at you on the virtual. The debt situation, and I think that comes to some education and training in our K-12 system. And something to take the and then if I would like to give a shout out to XP just for fixing the talent pipeline. Say talent pipeline, what I really mean is making technology look cool with priority. So if there's any help that you need industry, Intel, video, so we could talk to inspired towards things like technology, useful to create art and music, something like that. I think that would one question I did have for how do you bridge the rural urban divide? I'm not sure if the states entirely something there. So students who are in rural areas of these services.
We actually are sort of converting a van to be a virtual tech lab on wheels right now. So we can go out to schools, go out to smaller communities, and I mentioned earlier trying to make it very accessible, and that's just part of it. Is if they can't come to us, then we can come to them, and also not just pick them up, but like bring the experience to them, the whole experience, And I think I really appreciate you saying that, if we could, I think it's really important for kids to have role models and to have success stories and for people to speak to them who have done it. And it really gives them inspiration. I know, growing up and even still to this day, I see people talking who are in the position that I want to be in, and I see them successful, I see them happy, it sort of feeds that dream, which is like what we're trying to do. We're trying to keep that dream alive, like give them the dream, keep it alive, and then help them get there, you know?
One more question.
It was more just like a connection of what I heard following all of this, that how valuable that inspiration, those networks from people, professionals in the business. And so I think that's something, we're going to want to think about as an industry consortium, because employees are busy and they're there to make money and further their jobs. But how are we also then building those connections? Because I've also seen you can get your foot into the careers, but sometimes that advancement, if you don't have that social network and that knowledge of how to do pathways and those connections and that mentor who inspired you, sometimes then you're stuck in those entryway positions, don't have that movement forward. So I think as we're thinking about priority populations, that we really have to think about how are we blurring those lines between training.
First of all, thank you. These all sound like wonderful programs, so thank you for sharing about each and every one. One of the takeaways I have is, that thing that I think everyone goes through, which is how you craft the presentation of yourself to actually become a match with someone else or a group. And to me, it's something for us to look at is what are the ways that we can help not just individuals, but frankly, organizations like yourselves to understand, what is a resume or what is a presentation of someone's work, for being a puppet here or a designer, what is the best way to actually do that in an effective way that, honestly, as someone on the employer side, where I have to go through 70 resumes just for one position, and what's going to be that thing that stands out, and we have a methodology to go through, but it's a lot of work to go. And in some cases, someone mentioned earlier, it may be we don't really care about the resume. We want to look at the GitHub repo to see what their code looks like. And so I think in the same way a designer, we want to look at their portfolio and all these things. And so to me, that's one of the toughest things on the employer side is how to go through. Again, we've all been there on the other side of trying to present ourselves. And when I hear of someone who has masters and was doing this their PE, which you've never tried to do that, it's a lot of work. And so it ends up being getting rejected, in that case, not from an employer, but from an educational opportunity that, it feels like there's opportunity for us of how we can do a better job of, again, speaking, I don't know if I want to say common language, but at least having a common thought process. What are going to be the ways we make those decisions for what's the right direction?
Thanks. All right, I think that.
Just would you all join me in thanking our panelists? You've given us so much to think about, and I'm sure this won't be the last opportunity we have to engage with one another, but we are going to move on with our agenda today, and we have a break built in now. So if folks want to take a few minutes to stretch your legs, there is still coffee and snacks out in the foyer, and we'll reconvene at 1:30. Thank you all again so much.
All right, well, in this next to last session, we're going to hear from Jennifer Purcell and Todd Nell. Like a duo. Nell and Purcell. About both the short term and the middle term goals, aspirations for the consortium. So I'll start by.
Thank you. All right, well, as promised, today is a lot of talking at you, but we've really tried to build in some space for conversations, and hopefully that panel sparked some ideas as we move through the balance of the day today. We thought we would start with a little bit of a framing about the short term. So we talked about the Future Ready Oregon grant making opportunities, specifically workforce ready grants, where we have the most flexible funding. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what the parameters are for that funding opportunity, which should help inform your thinking about recommendations in the short term. And then Todd's going to walk us through some information about the Workforce and Talent Development Board and how this interrelationship will develop. So this slide should look familiar to you because it was in my earlier presentation. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we talked about the role of the consortia, the shared leadership model, and the unique position that you all are in about for informing the next funding opportunities for Future Ready. Now I have. So let's talk a little bit about timeline. I mentioned this earlier. We had our kickoff meeting in June. Today is your first quarterly meeting. We anticipate that we'll be at least in this initial period while we're working towards that first set of recommendations, that we'll be on a bit of a compressed schedule. So it says quarterly, we mean quarterly, but for the first 6 months, it might look a little bit more frequent than that. So anticipating late October, early November for that next quarterly meeting, and then probably January, given the holiday season, we'll avoid that. In January, we'll meet for the third quarterly meeting. And we've already talked about the short term and the long term, so I'm going to go ahead and move us to the next slide. So this is a bit of a picture of the Future Ready Oregon grant funding opportunities. And as you work towards your first set of recommendations, it's important to note that Future Ready Oregon strategically combined both state general funds and federal ARPA funding. And the initial investments that were passed by the legislature in 2022 kicked off our general fund administration through the balance of that biennium. Those grant funded investments totaling about $50 million were fully obligated by the HEC, and those grants closed out June 30th. So we're in the process of closing out those projects. You've heard from some of our grant recipients in the panel this afternoon about the capacity building work that those investments advanced. We also had general fund investments in a program called Prosperity 10,000, which were investments that went directly to the local workforce development boards across the state. Additionally, community college investments through a program called Career Pathways, and investments in credit for prior learning infrastructure at our colleges and universities across the state. We are now shifting gears into administering our federal funding, which is through the American Rescue Plan Act, Recovery Plan Act. I should know that. So we're moving into administration of that. The legislature reappropriated those federal funds, about 115 million, the bulk of which is in this flexible workforce ready grant funding. All of the ARPA investments have to be obligated by the end of 2024 and spent by the end of 2026. So this will be important when we talk about the short-term time frame for your recommendations. We have to have all of that funding under contract by the end of next year. We also, in the ARPA funding, have some additional investments going directly to the local workforce development boards to expand their capacity and partnerships, as well as standing up a pilot program called Benefits Navigators that are connecting job seekers with education and training opportunities across the state. Let's see. And so this is where the industry consortia come in. And I think we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Senate Bill 1545 from the 2022 legislative session established Future Ready Oregon. We've talked about the fact that the Higher Education Coordinating Commission is responsible for administering a good majority of the programs in Future Ready. There are some funding opportunities through the Youth Development Division of the Department of Education and through the Bureau of Labor and Industries, specifically around registered apprenticeships. All of the Future Ready Oregon investments prioritize particular populations. You've heard about or heard from some organizations already today that are serving particular priority populations, but the bill emphasizes workforce development opportunities, access to education and training for communities of color, women, low-income communities, rural and frontier communities, veterans, persons with disabilities, incarcerated and formerly incarcerated individuals, members of Oregon's 9 federally recognized tribes, individuals who disproportionately experience discrimination in employment on the basis of age, and individuals who identify as members of the LGBTQ+ community. And you can go to the next slide. When we talk about the workforce ready grants in particular, the statute lays out the eligibility criteria. Eligible applicants for workforce ready grant funding include workforce service providers and community-based organizations. We're going to look at the definitions of those in just a minute. And they must administer workforce programs in healthcare, manufacturing, and technology. This group will inform the priorities for the technology investments, and they must serve and prioritize equitable participation for individuals from the priority populations that we just walked through. Next slide, Pete, please. So a little bit about the eligible activities, and I do believe, yes, we have a slide on definitions coming up next, so we'll unpack these a little bit more. But workforce ready grants can really be used to fund sort of 3 buckets of activities. One is standing up or expanding curriculum, and that could include equipment or technology purchases to support curriculum. The second bucket is around capacity building for the organizations providing workforce services. And the third bucket is around individual resources for individuals. And that could be stipends for paid work experiences. That could be tuition and fee assistance, but it can also be stipends to offset wraparound supports and services that can include transportation, childcare, housing, some of those barriers that we've already heard about today. So this is specifically how the bill language outlines the eligible activities, but they generally fall in those 3 categories. Next slide, please. A little bit about definitions, as I mentioned, the eligible entities include workforce service providers and community-based organizations providing workforce programs. And so this, the bill outlines a definition for terms like workforce development and workforce programs that include education and training services, apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship programs. They can include labor market analysis. We had some initial work that was funded through Future Ready grant opportunities that looked at, further explored the barriers to employment and education for priority populations. Employment or re-employment services, recruitment and retention services, and then the convening, coordinating, and oversight for business and state workforce agencies. Workforce programs are programs that have the primary mission of helping individuals become employed, retain employment, or progress along a career pathway. Next slide, please. And when we think about community-based and culturally specific organizations as eligible entities, those include organizations that represent a particular community or specific segment of a community, that are located within or in close proximity to the community that they serve, and culturally specific organizations that understand the impact of racism or discrimination on the community they serve. They understand the specific disparities in access to services or resources that are experienced by the community. And as we talked about a little bit today, also understand the community's strengths and cultural practices and traditions. Workforce service providers include both nonprofit and public workforce education, training and career service providers, and governmental entities that are providers of workforce development services, including our 9 federally recognized tribes. Next slide, please. This slide, and these are in your packets, but this slide walks through some of the criteria that are foundational to the Workforce Ready grant. So when we talk about your role as establishing priorities for the next round of Workforce Ready grant funding to advance opportunities in the tech sector, these are in statute. These criteria are foundational to those investments, and it really is the consortium's job to think about the strategy with which we deploy those resources. So all Workforce Ready grant funding applications must demonstrate how the project engages with employers. They must describe experience serving individuals from priority populations, describe how the applicant or primary organization intends to collaborate with partners across education as well as industry and employment. Organizations have to demonstrate their organizational and technical capacity, outline the roles and responsibilities of partner applicants, and again, capacity funding is an eligible expense for the Workforce Ready grants, but talking about the organization's past history and capacity to carry out the proposal. And lastly, identifying opportunities to leverage other funding sources. So again, these are foundational criteria as we start to think about how we would inform strategy for investments specific to technology. And then this, I think, is my last slide. Again, back to timeline. So when we think about the Workforce Ready grants specifically, we would expect this group to be providing a first set of recommendations at that January meeting, and anticipating that we would then open the request for applications in the late spring, with making funding decisions and awards in the late summer would allow us to have those agreements under contract by the end of 2024, which you may remember is when we have to have the funds obligated. And then those organizations would have 2 years to implement the programming. I'm going to pause there. We'll turn it over to Todd to talk a little bit about the Workforce and Talent Development Board. But before we do, does anyone have questions about the Workforce Ready grants specifically? All right, Todd, take it.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Todd Nell, and I'm the Director of the Workforce and Talent Development Board in the Office of Workforce Investments at the Higher Education Coordinating Commission. It's a long title, but one that I've learned how to say. Mostly. I just want to take a few minutes today here before we get to the 2 o'clock hour to share some general sort of higher level background on state workforce boards, governor's role, and provide a bit of an overview on the Workforce and Talent Development Board here in Oregon, and then sort of roll into some of our current good work. Oops, hold on. Some of our current good work, including the work that we're doing with Future Ready and the Consortium. But before I do, I want to give a quick shout out to 2 important people that are members of the WTDB. One who is not here, but that Brooke knows really well at Portland General Electric, which is the chair of the Workforce and Talent Development Board, and Mercero, who's the vice president of Human Resources, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Portland General Electric. And then my good friend and colleague, Ben Camp, who is a manager with NVIDIA and a key and critical leader on the Workforce and Talent Development Board. Thank you for your leadership and all that you do for the state of Oregon. So let's jump in. So this is going to get a little bit technical, but I tried to keep it a little bit higher level, and I'm trying to talk pretty fast and quickly. So it's not quite as wonderful. The Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act is a 2014 federal law that really seeks to align numerous programs that receive federal funding for workforce development related efforts. These programs are collectively known as WorkSource Oregon in our state. This WorkSource Oregon system provides employment, education, and training services to job seekers and employers. Under the Act, the governor is really responsible for the WorkSource Oregon system. The governor fulfills this responsibility through state workforce development board activities and through state agencies who receive this federal funding. All governors across the country are required to establish a state workforce board to carry out the functions that are described in what we affectionately call WIOA. The Workforce and Talent Development Board is the state board in Oregon, as many of you likely know. The governor or his or her designation. The governor must also submit for approval to the U.S. Department of Labor a state workforce plan that's developed vis-a-vis engagement and collaboration with about 20 partners, sometimes more, including Oregon's 9 local workforce development boards. This combined state plan is produced every 4 years with a midpoint modification at 2 years. Our WTDB strategic plan is intentionally a 2-year strategic plan and is an important part of this work, which informs that state planning and local planning process. So this is different than I thought it was going to be, but hey, this is a great map of all the 9 local workforce boards around this state. And as some of you may know, we have one of the executive directors with us today at Work Systems, which is the local board in the Portland metro area. So the charge of the WTDB is to advise and assist the governor's office on legislature, or at the governor's office and the legislature on strategies, planning, and policy, including continuous improvement, systems alignment in the Workforce Oregon system, and more. That alignment and improvement also applies to the entire workforce development system, including K-12, STEM, CTE, post-secondary, economic development, and I just put many others because it gets really big and really complex to keep adding to those comments. So the WTDB, as some of you know, is made up of leaders representing business, labor, community-based organizations, the legislature, local elected officials, state agencies, local workforce boards, and other partners. And it's really uniquely positioned to be Oregon's workforce and talent development expert. The WTDB membership brings a wide range of diverse voices and perspectives, and the board is just over 40 members strong and is highly diverse. And the majority of the board members must represent the business community as required by WEHO. I wanted to also mention in 2017, the WTDB adopted the High Performing Workforce Board model that was developed by the National Governors Association, entitled Building a High Performing State Workforce Board. The reason that we adopted that in 2017 is because of proven success with many other best practice states around the country in terms of its outlining key strategies that governors can focus on to align K-12 and post-secondary in particular with the entire workforce system to better meet longitudinally the needs of business and connect individuals to jobs. So that said, as Jennifer touched on, we do have a role within Future Ready Oregon with both Prosperity 10,000 and the 3 consortia of healthcare, manufacturing, and this one in technology. So again, a little bit different than what I was expecting, but no problem. So these are some of our priorities that were mentioned in one of our previous meetings. And they are the strategic plan, continuous improvement, workforce readiness, this Future Ready Oregon, and legislative opportunities. So one of the primary duties of the Workforce Talent and Development Board in that assisting and advising they do for the governor's office is the development of the WTDB strategic plan. It's really the North Star for the entire workforce system and talent development in Oregon. It also, as I said a bit earlier, informs the strategic section of a very long and complicated state workforce plan that we have to submit to the Department of Labor to get funded. So one of those things that has to get done, takes a lot of time, and we're really working to lean into the continuous improvement, efficiency and effectiveness, and better partnering with local boards who are instrumental in bringing local plans from all the 36 counties into that work so that we really make it as intentional and meaningful as possible. So our vision on our strategic plan is equitable prosperity for all Oregonians, and it's backed by our vision or our mission to advance Oregon through education, training, jobs, and careers by empowering people and employers. You can find this first ever one page, roughly. So if you put them on front and back, we count it as one page. But it's way better than what we had before, which was, I feel like it was 25 to 30 pages. And instead of it being a 2-year plan, it was like a 5. And even back historically a 10-year plan, which was sort of that proverbial stick it on the shelf and don't pull it off and let it collect dust sort of plan. It's much more focused, intentional, and really resonates with the business folks on the plan. But it doesn't include critical priorities and deliverables you can see here. And it also includes objectives and initiatives that flow from Future Ready and our WTDB Continuous Improvement Committee. And it can be found on our website. I'm not going to belabor that and go into the weeds at this juncture. So on to the next slide. And this is about continuous improvement. So in 2021, Governor Brown signed Senate Bill 623, requiring the WTDB in consultation with state workforce agencies and local workforce boards to establish the Continuous Improvement Committee. The committee's main charge is to assess the effectiveness of WorkSource Oregon, and the law establishes a requirement for the KIC to identify and contract with an independent third-party contractor to conduct regularly scheduled comprehensive assessments of WorkSource Oregon, its programs, and its services. So there's a balanced mix of committee membership on the KIC at both the state and local level, which ensures input from a variety of Oregon's historically marginalized groups and underrepresented communities, which are incorporated into the assessments. Senate Bill 623 also requires the KIC to present findings and recommendations for each assessment via report to the governor and the legislature, and that's every even-numbered year. Our most recent governance assessment includes key findings and pillars for improvement, which included shorter-term and longer-term recommendations. We are excited about the work of the committee and the governance assessment, which has been recognized by the National Governors Association and their best practices division on workforce development and economic policy as a national best practice. I'm going to skip over this one in respect for time and jump to the Future Ready Oregon slide here. The WTDB played a major and important role in the initial ideation and innovation behind Future Ready through our Equitable Prosperity Task Force, which helped to inform the workforce work group of the Racial Justice Council. Under Future Ready Oregon, the WTDB, in consultation with the KIC, has three critical roles under Prosperity 10,000. It oversees progress, it ensures program goals are met, and identifies areas for program improvement. The Prosperity 10,000 program was designed to provide a series of workforce and development opportunities and supports, especially for priority populations through the 9 local workforce boards, as Jennifer touched on earlier. We're at time, so I'm going to move on to the WTDB's advisory role with industry consortia. They're both talent development roles and system alignment roles. We'll leave it there. There's another table that'll provide cross connection with your work here on the Technology Consortium, and that will be this committee, the Legislative Opportunities Committee. This committee provides a more intentional, collaborative, and structured approach to focus efforts on strategic plan priorities through policy development and funding strategies. The LOC provides the system space to consider and co-create and potentially craft meaningful legislation with supporting investments to drive more targeted action, continuous improvement, innovation, and transformative systems change. The manufacturing, healthcare, and technology consortia all have an advisory role to the WTDB, with each including strong connectivity and cross membership with this legislative committee. We envision it to be a critical touch point for success during the short session in 2024, potentially, and then in our next long session in 2025, and then over the long run, 2026 and beyond. The LLC will provide a multi-sector, multi-partner thought sharing space for improvement and alignment across the workforce and talent development system. It'll be a critical table whereby strategy, policy, and funding for the technology workforce strategies that go beyond workforce readiness or workforce ready grant funding. The WTDB has established a recognized and respected protocol in terms of deliverables of our committees and task forces, which is a research project and a report that then is forwarded on to the governor and the legislature for their review along with recommendations. We anticipate that same thing to hold true for the Legislative Opportunity Committee. So more to come from that committee, but the WTDB looks forward to working with you all in the technology consortia in your role as advisory to the WTDB on workforce and talent strategies as you continue to address technology and workforce needs, identify education and training assets, and really recommend funding strategies to address gaps and opportunities for Oregon students, our workers, our businesses, and employers. With that, I'd like to say thank you to Jennifer Purcell for giving the opportunity to come here and share a bit about the WTDB. And on behalf of the WTDB, we look forward to partnering, learning, and meeting with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. All right, so that was a lot of information coming at you virtually all day. Fire hose like intensity, perhaps. So to close out the day, we want to give you a little bit of a chance to talk to each other, process what you've heard, and think about next steps, essentially. So we were going to do a kind of a simple breakout session here, not moving you all over the place, but rather just allowing you to group up in groups of 3 or 4. I think there are about 15 or 16 of you left, so that will work out rather nicely. Come up with about 4 groups, and have you reflect a little bit on what you've heard. So starting all the way back this morning with what Skip shared on the survey results and kind of those learnings, and then thinking about the panel presentations that we heard over lunch, and then as well as all the other information that has been shared around the table today. And think a little bit about, right? Oh no. So think about what look like some of the key opportunities or key gaps or challenges that you would like to explore further, particularly thinking about the opportunities with the not just the whole group, but also the working groups that will be convening. So just what floats to the top for you? What looks like, and not that we have to make final decisions here, but this kind of what is resonating after this day of information sharing, discussion. What is still sticking in your head? Does that make sense? And then we'll have you guys talk about that in these groups of 3 or 4, and then we'll for about 10 minutes or so, 10, 15 minutes, and then we'll come back and share and have a more of a plenary discussion about what those things are, what drives to the top, and what looks like the strategy moving forward. Does that make sense? All right, so just group yourselves up into groups of 4 informally. We're not going to go off to different rooms. Anybody want to go first? Kind of share some of that. All right, so Ruckus group. Yeah.
We identified, I think there's a lot of opportunity to unify and align services. I think one of the things we looked at was, or talked about was being thoughtful around how we serve incarcerated folks, and people transitioning back. I think there's some opportunity there. We also talked about expanding that, or really the utility to CBOs of having some micro credentials that live around the soft skills piece. And then we also discussed just in our group sort of as a gap is there is kind of a cohesion gap. You know, that even with this many participants, we're not sure that we have all the right folks in the room. That are, so there's people working on the same project from different perspectives, different pots of money, and we're not sure that they're all able to unify our that we all get, I get a yellow or green.
That one, the other. Okay. Yep.
I think we have about 20 things, so I'm gonna not do all 20. One of the top items was a discussion around human skills and just the fact that it is something when you talk technology gets lost in the mix. And so how are we at an early age? How are we actually connecting with, you know, the workers of tomorrow and understanding, you know, and messaging that encourages those that technology is a pathway that they can be very successful, very excited about. I think along with that, what is tech? And not scaring people away that you need that CS degree in order to go into tech. I'm to the group that I would hire an English major any day of the week because I have a whole bunch of tech people who can't communicate or write. So it ends up being you can't communicate what you're doing. What you've done really is lower in value. And I think what goes with that is one of the comments was that we go so strongly at tech about its coding. It's all about coding. It's so much more. As we've talked about adjacent technologies, adjacent concerns, I think that's something we can do a better job of messaging and supporting in various ways. Talking about how we can help people to translate who they are, what they do, into ways that connects with employers and with others around them. Mentorship, as people, imposter syndrome was a term thrown out multiple times by us. And so how do we get people and encourage people, not just through mentioning human skills, however, at an early age, yes, you can be successful in doing this. Yes, you will do a great job, but how are we having mentorship opportunities where we can actually continue to foster that well beyond K through 12? So as we talk about incarceration, one of the discussions we had was around prior to someone even being incarcerated. You know, there's people who are on a pathway potentially to incarceration. So how are we when there are, this is probably the wrong term, I used it, I'm not sure if it's the right one, but a diversion program prior to, it orients someone to a pathway that would be towards technology. So is there something that would encourage, you know, people who have great aptitudes and have be great fits for technology? What is it that prior to that step of incarceration that they could actually find a different path? That looking at new technology, and you know, we're all doing AI really well right now and successfully. We're years in using it, but that aside, how are we as a state, how are we identifying new technology early and basically claiming our stake as we are the center of excellence, not just in the nation, but in the world? And how are we supporting that in a unified vision that goes not just by individual organizations, but at our community college and higher ed, so that we can actually back up that claim as being a center of excellence. And then just as someone who is the proud husband of a public librarian, how do we close the technology gap? Because if you really want to see the technology gap, some of you as in your organizations are helping people to close that, but also encourage you to go to your local public library and watch people trying to use a computer. And whether they're using that to check their email, whether they're there to actually apply for a job. Statements earlier that people cannot use an online job application, I can tell you it's true. And it's one where we're doing a lot of work at OHSU to try and figure out better ways to connect with we will take anyone and everyone at OHSU, but at the same time, we can't reach everyone and anyone because of technology gaps. I think that's something that if we can't reach them, they're never going to know what we have.
All right.
So yeah, I just love I really enjoyed how many common themes there are. I just have to say, as someone who works in reentry, like you're like on an island very often. So when, you have a certain concerns validated by so many different people, it just makes you feel like you're on the right track as far as what you're seeing, what needs you're seeing. So on that note, barriers, transportation and access to technology, those are also so many others, but those seem to be really common across a lot of priority populations, and they can kind of go together. And then technology, just really remembering that's access, that's actual access to an internet connection, and that's tools and effective tools. I was talking about how I help people fill out applications all day for a free cell phone or free tablet. It's not the greatest phone or tablet. And as we know, we're so reliant, maybe back in the day that would have got them by, and sure, it'll get them, they'll be able to make a phone call at least. But if we're talking about access, if we're talking about them getting in the door, those free things are not going to do it for them. So I think leveraging, of course, what's already there, and then recognizing and seeing where there's opportunities we're really making sure that these are actual effective and accessible options for folks. And then the next topic was sort of big, but basically kind of the word networking came up a lot, and I think it can encompass a lot. So for us, with what Tamara does, networking is going out to employers, right? Educating them why people with backgrounds are great employees and why they should hire folks with backgrounds. And then in that conversation, very often what comes up is where are the supports? There's that need for wraparound services. And I know something that we've struggled with at our program as a small nonprofit, and I don't know if you all know this, but there's not a lot of re-entry nonprofits, right? So we're the folks in Marion County, and everyone that's ever been to jail or prison usually gets sent our way because it's like, oh, that's who can help you, and we do our best. But so tends to be this ping pong effect I've seen with sort of who's going to help with this, and there has to be that cohesion and integration, and it has to go on both sides. So for us, we've realized we really have to educate employers. The employer has to be ready to really commit to this. We can't determine human behavior. I can't force that person to stop using drugs or to go seek out help for their mental health. And even if I want to, there's not help for it anyway. So there has to be a commitment from the employer, and absolutely, heck, we need to find those opportunities where we can support them, because they need support, especially some of these smaller employers. They want to do it. They're ready, but they don't have the support. So the support it has to go both directions. And we can't keep asking CBOs, to just kind of fix everyone and do it all, because we just cannot, especially now, because our folks are really, really, really struggling. So yeah, that networking going both ways, and leveraging and just making sure it's all really integrated.
Great, thank you. I'm heading for this plan.
Well, we were rule breakers because we didn't see Melissa left because she was going to be our spokesperson. We didn't select a spokesperson, so but I'll speak anyway. We talked around a number of different issues. One is starting with, we'd like to have more conversation about the detailed legislation around the workforce ready grants, and then really how this group can help define that and refine it to make it actionable. We talked about the lack of digital literacy and fluency. The gap is actually increasing
with our young people. Just because they have a device in their hand doesn't mean that they are digitally fluent. And that's becoming an increasing issue for employers. We've discussed that 65% of the tech workforce doesn't work for the apex employers in the room here. It works for the healthcare systems, banking, finance, every business today is a tech-enabled business. And so how do we purposefully create that as maybe the feeder system to the high-tech industry? And there was one other thing. Oh, yes, and how do we be, my university partners, apologies, but generally university programs can't move as fast as the technological changes. And so how do we work to bridge that, whether it's credentialing or certificates and work experience, and how does that feed into people coming from non-traditional pathways as an entry point into higher education?
I shared one comment around our experience recruiting at some of the Oregon universities, and that the curricula, even if you get a CS degree, the curricula design is not for the types of jobs that we're hiring for. And so while the curricula might look good in terms of like, hey, CS curriculum nationwide look very similar, the employers in the state may need different things. And so it may be worth a conversation between the employers and the universities around co-curriculum development that's tailored to what is in the geography.
All right, and our last.
Actually, we were volunteering Jennifer to do our report out, but she joined us. So Skip and I talked about a lot of things. I learned quite a few things, but I'm just going to talk about things that were not discussed so far. So I think the first one was we're trying to identify who are we serving. So who really qualifies as underrepresented? Is it a geography-based thing? Is it a residency timeline? How long have they been in Oregon? What about people who've been hired by an Oregon company that are working here? I think we need to spend some time identifying that customer base of ours. The second thing is some data from the employment department would be helpful to understand how many tech or tech-enabled jobs or tech-adjacent jobs are currently unfilled, and whether those are entry-level positions or experienced positions. So I think that's an action that we could ask Gail or somebody from the employment department to help us with. The other thing is computer proficiency and how do we define that? To Kevin's point about English majors or hiring English majors, I think we are getting to that point with all these large language models, because earlier we needed people to be able to learn basic coding, but now computers speak English language. You can get tasks done with just English. So prompt engineering would be a skill. And not to pick on Janelle, but the statewide K-12 curriculum is something that I learned needs a lot more local control, not recommendations from the Department of Education. So some kind of legislation and how do we influence that legislation and make computer science a core graduation requirement. And there are additional challenges around this with training the teachers. So we need to figure out how to do that. Not just K through 12, if I go towards community colleges, when we were doing this task force for the state, we were able to influence curriculum at Portland Community College, but then I think we need to expand that to community colleges across the state. And then we talked a little bit about interns and apprenticeships and
how small businesses need support, not just to hire interns, but also for training them, because a large part of these small businesses, they have a small workforce. And so if that workforce trains an intern, that's a large percentage of productivity loss. So what kind of support can we provide them for training and administration? And one other thing was infrastructure for workforce navigation. So it could use better technology to help people navigate the workforce system. For example, build a recommendation system where somebody can input their skills, their location, and then outcomes. What are the available jobs that they could apply to? And even if they don't have the skills for the jobs that are available, provide a recommendation for what is it that you can learn, and where do you go to acquire these skills. There's so many online training courses for free that are available, but the challenge is how do you navigate that? Some kind of infrastructure would be helpful there. And finally, I just wanted to point out that everything that we're identifying here as opportunities, a lot of that is dependent on healthcare, mental health care too. So there is an overlap between the technology consortium and the healthcare consortium. I think that is a larger overlap than there is with manufacturers. There's an opportunity there to share learning and recommendations.
And just one thing to build off of kind of the issue with smaller businesses not having infrastructure, in many cases to hire a lot of junior folks or bring on interns, apprentices. One thing that's interesting to note is that in Oregon, you have a lot of big deficiencies in terms of government being a huge employer, lots of infrastructure to like train and mentor folks, but they can't fill seats, like can't fill open positions, especially with tech related careers. And so we've been having some conversations with local and state, like CIOs and other folks, and especially in cybersecurity, where maybe local and state government could essentially be a proving ground for folks for X number of years. And maybe there's benefits in the form of like either assistance or tuition reimbursement or something where if you commit to X number of years working in the public sector, you get training experience and some additional benefits that help to offset maybe a slightly lower salary than what you could have gotten in the private sector. Just there has to be a recognition that in terms of the public sector, eventually those folks may get poached by the private sector, and that's okay. And in that way, you're not necessarily putting the burden on a lot of the smaller under-resourced businesses to do the initial training in some cases, but they're also there waiting to try and get folks who've got a few years of experience provided by the public sector. And it also solves for the issue of having infrastructure, mentorship process people to do some of the oversight and training, which a lot of the businesses in the private sector often lack.
Great. Any meta observations before we move into our wrap up? A lot of really insightful thinking from the groups. Thank you. It was all captured word for word. So you will get this kind of look at the big list, what that all looks like. Work through it, prioritize. So with that, I'm going to wrap us up here a little bit. Just kind of looking at what's coming up for you all. As I think Jennifer already mentioned, the next quarterly meeting of this group will take place in late October or possibly November. So that's when this group will convene as a whole again. In the meantime, in the interim, the initial working groups identified as a kickoff meeting will meet virtually, by the way, in September. So coming up next month. The two groups you will recall: integrating education and training responses and advancing equity and diversity and recruitment retention. Those two groups will be meeting. The working groups will continue the conversation about workforce needs and the survey information that you all provided. They will also review the kind of goals and priorities and definitions of success and what we're trying to accomplish. And importantly, identify what information, like some was just identified, for example, the statewide employment statistics that were mentioned a minute ago. Identify what information would be helpful to inform the thinking specifically on the workforce grants opportunity for the school to weigh in on that. So working groups will meet, as I said, during September virtually, and will report out to this group at the plenary meeting quarterly meeting in late October. I think that is all that I need today. Any closing words of wisdom from either our executive leadership team or Jennifer or anybody? Really? You use those 10 cards. All right, I think that's good. A great job today, everybody. Give yourselves a hand. That was a lot of work and a lot of